Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Godwin Ojo, Environmental Rights Action, Friends of the Earth, Nigeria. I'm here to make a case that we don't need to value nature. It's very important to understand that a country such as Nigeria that is 85% dependent on oil and its resources is also one of the countries that have brought up environmental activists, people who are defending the environment, and to say, leave the oil in the soil. And you are going to repeat it. Leave the oil in the soil. Leave the oil. Leave the oil. This is very important because if we put value on nature, there are so many things that it will cause. Number one, it will increase the commodification of natural resources. It will increase privatization. It will lead to dispossession. So much so that it will be a question of rich countries, rich people that are able to afford and buy land, forest land, water, food, and other services of nature. We don't need to put a price on nature because it disregards equity issues. We don't need to put a price on nature because there is actually no true price for nature. Prices of commodities, as we all know, is politically determined and not based on real economic terms. Now, the real question is, from the perspective of economic modernization theory, they have come up to say that finite resources can be made to become non-finite as long as there's efficiency and as long as there is other forms of fiscal policies that will lead to elasticity of the products. But we fully understand that the concept of valuing biodiversity is corporate-driven in ways that it perpetrates the further capture of the state, further capture of global governmental institutions, and of course, the capture of resources, land, water, food, etc., including genes. Now, what has been the situation at play? We see that in the case of Bodo, that took Shell to court in London, $83 million was paid, with Shell on its knees and begging to pay compensation of $83 million to otherwise hapless communities. Now, you will think that that was a very good outcome. It was out-of-court settlement. But Shell has agreed to pay that money to escape from being sentenced on a criminal charge in a London court. And $83 million looked big, but it was just a paltry sum for 11,500 litigants, which boils down to just about $5,000 per person, with also loss of livelihood, pollution of waters, gas flaring continues. So it did not in any way measure up to the real value of livelihood they have lost over the years. So the present system of valuation is arbitrary. And to take a step further, in the case of Ecuador against Chevron, they are demanding for $700 billion just for three things: for destruction, for remedy, and compensation. But there's a new concept that has been added to that. The volume of oil spill has to be quantified, not just a judicial process of asking for environmental justice. What about the volume of oil spill and the value? What about the gas flaring? What about the killings? So it is difficult to really place a value on nature with the perspective of securing environmental justice. And so we say, no, don't value. Communities are now even asking the question, why do we have to value our land, our forest land? Why do we have to value? It is simply because if you put a value on land, it immediately transfers that land into the market domain. And it's different from not to value at all. Because if you don't value and put monetary value on it, it is not in the market. So it is very crucial to understand that communities have always exercised ownership of natural resources through collective ownership, collective control, collective use. And by valuing biodiversity, it will help to enforce this new drive of corporate capture of all resources. So I make a very strong case, let's not support valuing biodiversity. But on the other hand, if the argument must be pushed further that we should value biodiversity and all forms of externalities in the production process, especially in oil and gas issues, then let us value, but within the concept of environmental justice. I say this very clearly because I am fully convinced that when we truly account for the externalities in the production process, then many companies, especially those in the extractive, will become unviable. Take, for instance, the situation in Ogoniland, where Ken Saro-Wiwa and 8 others were killed just for fighting against Texaco, fighting against Shell. And United Nations Environmental Program said benzene is found in water 900 times above World Health Organization standard. What price do you pay for that? And we have found, according to a report, that soil has been contaminated above 5 meters deep in places that have been cleaned up for over 10 or 15 years. How do you account for that? The insects, the biodiversity, things that have been killed, migratory birds. Now, the Ogonis have been divided, and they remain divided. The issues, the abstract issues that are the more enduring to human beings, which is caring, sharing, and loving, has been relegated. How do you account for that? Now, in Nigeria, the issue of ecocide has become very strong, and it's one of the cases that is being brought up to United Nations Human Rights Commission to ensure that corporations are held accountable for their violations of human rights during their operations. Now, the case of ecocide, which is a criminal act, is one that can be highly proven in Nigeria. Since 1956, oil spill and gas flaring continues non-stop. Now, how do you account for such high-level destruction? If we are to account for the oil spills since 1956, if we are to account for the oil, if we are to account for the devastation, the disharmony, the conflict, the hatred that has been perpetrated, the divide and rule, how do you account for that? These are the more enduring issues about life. How do you account for social services of nature, sequestration, carbon sequestration, and all other forms of biodiversity that the people depend on? So we have come very much to the conclusion, yes, if we need to value nature, we need to value nature within the concept of environmental justice that talks about remediation, compensation, and not within the realm of market mechanism that places nature in the market for speculation and trading. So when we talk about compensation, yes, let's value nature, let's value what has been lost, let's value what has been destroyed. And in doing so, we will see without doubt that corporations have violated so much. In a very small enclave such as Ogoni, the United Nations have recommended $1 billion for cleanup fund in a 5-year period. And within a period that cleanup will last a lifetime, about 30 years. Think about that. So all the hue and cry about valuation is to put the resources in the market. And we say no. When we value, if at all, value must be placed on nature, it must be within the concept of environmental justice in order to promote prevention, in order to ask for remedy and compensation. It is only within these spheres that we can promote positive economy and have hope for a viable planet Earth. Thank you very much.